Hello everybody and welcome back to the Sunday night edition of the My Generation podcast. Here on today's Sunday evening episode of the show, we're talking about another really fun subject. It's not a movie review this week, it is an anecdote from my past. So we are talking about Lego, and this ties quite nicely into the guests we have coming up on this Thursday edition of the show coming. We're talking about Lego again there, but with Tom, Harry and Connor, who we've had on the show many times before. If you caught the 1 year anniversary special of the podcast, you found out that they were all massive Lego fans. So we knew that we had to bring this discussion to life. We had to, have this on the show as a full episode. So we are doing that this coming Thursday. But for now, I just wanted to talk about my personal connection with Lego, and then you can hear about theirs on Thursday. So Lego has been a massive part of my life, literally since I was 6 years old. I was collecting Lego, and it sort of started off with the Jack Stone stuff, actually, very interestingly, before sort of progressing to Lego Star Wars and Lego Indiana Jones. The Lego Indiana Jones theme was massive for me growing up, and I knew that Lego was something I wanted to do something more aligned with creatively, and as opposed to just building sets. Tom, who we have talking about it this Thursday, is a massive fan of building and just displaying sets, which is something I do more now, but growing up I just could not keep a set built. Once I built it, had to be taken apart and used to create new things. I had a lot of really creative base plates, and I would sort of enact out a lot of stories on Lego base plates and mixing up sets and such. But I decided I had to turn these stories that I was telling into something creative, and YouTube was a very vibrant place for Lego animation in the sort of time I was growing up, sort of between 2007 and 2012, when I was sort of mainly doing this. There was so much Lego animation that was so creative going out on YouTube, and I followed some really talented creators. The one who I've always sort of pinned as like the person who really got me into this animation is Nathan Wells, a YouTuber who now does more crafting stuff, and it's amazing to see that he's still on the platform. But he was a massive inspiration of mine growing up. His animations were extremely complex. They were 10-15 minutes long, and I was just awestruck by them. Also, Brick Dictator, really creative channel. So there was just so much good stuff out there. Now, when I started making Lego animations, obviously I was about 8 or 9 years old, so I wasn't exactly, sort of clued up on all of the skills that you needed, but I was doing quite a lot of research considering my age. And I got a Logitech webcam that was just a USB plug-in into a laptop, downloaded iKit Movie Maker. I checked that out, and you can still actually order that, which is incredible. And I used like the onion skinning tool, and I just went away and made Lego animations all across my house, many different styles. It was great fun. And then I think once I put them through iKit, I then added text and things in Windows Movie Maker. So that was my beginning of film. As those of you who've listened to maybe episodes of the podcast before, if you know me, you know I'm a film student. This was my entry into the filmmaking world, was these little Lego animations, because before that, sort of at around 5 to 6 years old, I was making little films with my friends, but nothing super serious. We actually used to, get some like costumes and like film just on tiny little camcorders in like the back garden. We used to set up like obstacle courses and film ourselves running around them. That was pretty good fun. But this Lego animation gave me a way to make films for me, without sort of needing anyone else a part of the creative process. I got some of my family and really close to friends to like voice extra lines if I needed them, but I quite often just voiced them myself. And the big one that sort of kicked things off was sort of going into year 6 of primary school, which was about when I was 9 or 10 years old. We had to do a project across the summer, and then present it at the start of the year. So I had 3 months to basically make a little project on whatever I wanted, and Lego animation was a big thing for me. So I made my most, for what my age was, most complex film yet. It was a little Lego animation called Back to School, and it sort of it just documented going back to year 6 and returning after the summer. And it wasn't obviously to the highest of standards, but for my age, I'm extremely proud of it, and I love going back and watching it. It's by all intensive purposes not an incredible animation. There is water effects that I use blue tack for. I sing in it, which is something no one needs to hear, and it was just overall a really, really fun adventure to make. I can still remember making it, which is crazy, but it was sort of the ripple effect that came from that was also really cool, because that project got shown to actually hundreds of people just because of it inspired others to make things like it, and watching that outreach was actually just incredibly surreal for my age. It was the first time anyone had sort of seen anything I created artistically. I'd never really shared art before up until that point, and so this was the first time where I was actually going out there and making something that I made from beginning to end, because I found sort of through my secondary school age there were so many things and projects that I wanted to do, but I could never sort of push them all the way through. And even in primary school, you come up with all these ideas of things you want to make that you just never make, and this animation was the first time I took the plunge and I finished something, and it came out really good. There was a little animation club that started up at the school that I was a part of, and that was awesome. And then when we left primary school, there was sort of a big every year does like a big sort of end production kind of thing to like sign off from school, and our year group did The Great Escape, which was really awesome. It was like, escaping primary school, going to secondary school, and there was a part where we had to do like CCTV footage of us leaving the school and like making our escape, and we all did it as little animations, and some people used Lego, some people didn't, and that was so creative. I have no idea where they are though. I wish I could find those little clips. And that performance was awesome. That was so much fun. And that carried on for a little bit. I did more Lego animation moving into secondary school, sort of year 7 and 8, and just kept having fun with it really. I sort of then, at that sort of point in my life, sort of fell out of love with Lego, which was quite interesting. I moved away from the games, I moved away from the sets. It was all sort of boxed up and put in the loft like many of you may have had experiences with, but Lego always had to make its resurgence in my life somehow. And judging by the way you've heard me talk about it on the podcast before, e.g. the second episode of the show where I talked about my Lego collecting in the modern day, and how we mentioned it in the 1 year anniversary of the show, and how we'll be talking in even more depth this coming Thursday about it. So please stay tuned for that. If you're excited by what I've been talking about here today, then please do listen out for that Thursday episode, because we're just going into even more people's story with Lego. It's awesome. But I sort of fell out of love with it for a couple of years actually, and it wasn't until my 16th birthday where I thought, do you know what, this could be something I could get back into. And I wanted something over that Christmas, because I was at the time, I believe I was working for McDonald's, or I think it might be, no, it was my 17th birthday. I'd been working for McDonald's, and I did actually really enjoy having McDonald's as my, the place I started. And I'd worked I think I worked Boxing Day, and Boxing Day is a notoriously quite busy time, and I worked sort of in and around that Christmas period, and I knew that I wanted something that I could use to sort of unwind after quite a really busy time for work. And so I asked for the Lego Death Star, and asked, if I could build that in and around my birthday, and I got that. It was the 2008 edition of the Death Star, which was still on shelves at the time when I was 17. I loved that set. I built it. I've still got it. It's right behind me from where I'm recording right now. I built it, I believe, in the old house, or was it here? God, it all becomes a bit of a blur, really, doesn't it? But I built that. Really enjoyed the process of building it, and for that I started enjoying Lego for a different reason. I enjoyed putting on a podcast, which is part of the reason I love podcasts, and would just build the set, or I'd listen to music, or I'd listen to some self-help or meditation, or just something that would help me whilst and something I knew I needed to listen to, and it would give me something to physically do whilst I was listening. And then you had something really cool to display. And so I built out my Lego collection from there. And as the collection grew, I knew I needed to share what I had. And because there were so many people beginning to share on Instagram through the medium of photography, and the Lego photography Instagram community is a beautiful place still to this day, really. And I love going back into it and exploring and seeing what new things people are building and making, and new ways people are thinking of taking photos, and how their editing effects into them and making them almost look lifelike with just how realistic some of the photos are. Almost like you can't even tell it's Lego anymore. It's and we have a few examples of that on Thursday. It's a really, really creative sphere, and so I started to share some of that stuff over on my Instagram for a little while, and thoroughly enjoyed that, because I had I've still got it's now my sort of older camera, but I mean, this camera's done me a lot of good service. I know it's not an incredibly high-end camera, but it's the Canon 60D. I used a nifty 50 prime lens with some extension tubes on it, so I could do macro style of photography, which was really cool. It created a really shallow depth of field, and for those of you who aren't photography buffs like me, what it allowed you to do then, or what it sort of enforced with these extension tubes, was that everything in the background was blurred really intensely. It meant there was only one really sort of sharp point of focus, which gave me my own sort of challenges, but I sort of rose to that. And I had different lengths of extension tubes and other lenses as well. I had a 28mm, which I used quite a bit, but the 50mm was my sort of go-to, just because it looked the most cinematic, and even when I didn't have the extension tubes on, you could get this really nice blur effect on it. And that is really my journey through sort of collecting Lego. I sort of thoroughly enjoyed that process the whole way through. It changed over time. It went from stop motion on sort of a webcam hooked up to my laptop, moving across to photography with a DSLR in the modern day. And that's been sort of the more physical form of what I've done with Lego. If you move over to sort of the video game side of things, it's sort of a different path altogether. If we sort of take it all the way back to when I was sort of 5 or 6 again, I used to love, this says a lot about me, I used to love playing Lego chess. Did you ever play Lego chess? That game was incredible. It had like little cutscenes when like a piece would take another piece, and I can still hear the music in my head. It was, I think it was a game from the late 90s, and I played it in like 2005-ish, and thoroughly enjoyed that. But then I sort of moved across to the very well-known and very well-loved Lego Star Wars and Lego Indiana Jones. Obviously, the Lego chess game wasn't as big as those, but Lego Star Wars and Indiana Jones are incredible for a number of reasons for me. Firstly, just in the story, not having voices was actually a really interesting choice, because it actually meant that a lot more had to be done expressively. It kind of felt like almost like silent films for the modern day, and I always found that quite a creative decision, because it's like Mr. Bean. You're taking away something that's so essential to communication and to narrative as dialogue is. Like, I'm podcasting, I do work in radio. It's and it's all about communication and talking and, you know, getting information across. And this entire different side of storytelling, where you're just using something physical, was really interesting to me. I love the games for that. They were extremely comedic, and they were tied to very good properties. I was a massive fan of the Star Wars prequels growing up. They still have a place in my heart. Always do the Star Wars prequels. And Lego Indiana Jones, thoroughly enjoyed the Indiana Jones movies. They are just so good. Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, I don't feel it's quite a strong movie. I like it a little bit more than I think it is generally seen to be enjoyed, but I did sort of grow up around it. But the original 3 movies and the sets that came with them, they came at the perfect time for my childhood, really, and I just loved playing the Indiana Jones game. And those were the 2 that resonated with me the most. They were the 2 I played the most, and I made a couple of YouTube videos, I remember, on them. Like, I always loved looking up like the Easter eggs and trying to find all the little secrets in there. And I know that they're making a resurgence with the Star Wars one. They are bringing, all of the movies into one game, which is just awesome to see. I'm so glad that that is finally coming. Definitely going to be picking that up. I'm not massively into video games at the moment, but I probably can make an exception for the Lego Star Wars game. And I think it just goes to show just to enjoy your hobbies, just to put out there the things you love. I'm always been a massive fan of Lego, and I fell out of love for it for a few years because I felt like I needed to move on from it. But it kept coming back, and I kept having an enjoyment to go back to it. And it was, I even enjoy Mega Constructs as well. I have some of the Halo line for that. It's all great stuff. It's just that experience can't be taken away, and that love did change. I mean, from the way I used to have Lego as a kid, where I would pull sets apart and break them and draw on them and put permanent marker all over pieces and animate on them and put blue tack everywhere and film them. And that changed to being, more displaying and presentation and photography. It was just sort of a shift, and one I'm quite glad happened because it meant that the love came back for this, and the community out there is so strong for Lego at the moment. I know that as of the time I'm recording this, sort of still in lockdown, I know that having something like Lego is actually quite nice. I had a sort of a few sets that I hadn't built but before, that I picked up before lockdown, and been building them in this time. It's been really nice. And watching Lego videos online, I've actually returned to some of the old nostalgic ones that I watched when I was much younger, which is very interesting. Just in this time, I thought, in preparation for this, I'd go back and watch some of the animations that I watched when I was younger. There was a couple of them that had been sort of taken down off of YouTube and sort of re-uploaded, and watching and looking at the comments, it was clear that these little movies had also influenced other people's childhoods, because they had seen this and it had inspired something in them to go out and create. And I think that really was the most powerful and important part. It brought me and my friends together growing up. Me and a couple of my mates would go, around one of our houses and do some filming of little Lego animation bits and pieces. It just brought everyone together, and the fact that it has, in the modern day, still now, with Connor, Harry, and Tom all coming on the show to talk about their experiences with Lego this coming Thursday, it's just so important. And I feel like something that every sort of niche hobby probably has as well. So I'd love to know if you have a connection with Lego in the comments below. If you do, please do let me know. I'd love to share more of your stories about this subject. It's something I'm going to keep talking about on the podcast, so do let me know. Or if you've got a hobby where you've got a similar story, where maybe you fell out of love with it and then came back to it at a later point, because we do sometimes fall away from hobbies that we enjoyed, and it's interesting what ones kind of bubble up to the surface again. They have a funny way of doing so, hobbies. But I think hobbies around your work are quite important, because it's nice to have something fun to look forward to, because I love my work, I really do. I enjoy all of the work that I do, but it's also great to have sort of something away from what I do that can be just for me, and those kind of hobbies are important. So please do share in the comments what yours are, because I'd be very interested in knowing and sharing with the rest of the people who listen along with the podcast. So that is really it for this week on the Sunday night edition of the podcast. I plan to do more film reviews in the future, more anecdotes, and loads of cool stuff in the pipeline for the Sunday night edition of the show, because it's really nice to have this sort of blend at the moment. Let me know what you think about these Sunday night editions, because they're still fairly new considering how long this podcast has been running for. But obviously on a Thursday, for those of you who maybe are new to the show, I have a guest on the show with I also have a music feature, a film review feature, We've got new features coming up in the show with poetry, video game reviews, and Tom, who's coming on about Lego, will be doing pirate profiles, interestingly, on the My Generation podcast very soon. So the Thursday show is a very, very packed out show with lots of features, lots of voices. And then this Sunday night edition is just me and you talking about a film review, life anecdote, or something else, or just a question. Always something a little bit different every single week on a Thursday and a Sunday. So if you're liking the Sunday night editions, please do let me know in the comments. Would love to know and shape the podcast for what you enjoy listening to. Obviously, this Thursday is going to be Harry, Tom, and Connor talking about their experiences with Lego. You've heard mine. Let me know what you think. And on Thursday, they'll be sharing theirs. So excited to share that. So do tune in this Thursday at 6 to hear their story. I've been Max Barrett. Thank you very much for listening, and we're tuning in with you on Thursday for the next episode of the My Generation podcast.